This morning, at 6:40 a.m., the quiet over Eastern Europe was interrupted by a powerful explosion. Ukrainian intelligence, which had been tracking a large logistics convoy for weeks, confirmed a successful strike. According to multiple sources, the shipment originated in China and was destined for Moscow. The estimated value of the shipment was substantial, $2.8 billion worth of advanced military-grade materials. This reportedly included microchips, precision targeting systems, and drone components intended to resupply Russia's war reserves. For months, analysts had speculated that Beijing was expanding its logistical and financial support to Moscow, providing components that Russia could no longer source directly due to Western sanctions. This specific shipment, however, seemed to represent a significant escalation. If delivered, it could have altered the dynamics of the war. It was not just another cargo delivery. It signaled China's deepening involvement in Russia's military supply chain. The convoy began its journey through Central Asia, moving under the classification of industrial exports. It passed through Kazakhstan and into southern Russia, disguised as civilian freight and escorted by private security contractors. Ukrainian intelligence, however, had already identified the route using intercepted communications and satellite surveillance. This led to a precise, multi-stage operation that demonstrated Ukraine's developing capacity to coordinate modern warfare tactics and strike logistical networks deep behind the lines. As dawn broke, Ukrainian assets, including drones equipped with long-range optical sensors, pinpointed the convoy as it approached a key rail hub near Voronezh, just 300 kilometers from Moscow. Within minutes, a series of long-range missiles, reportedly from the Hrim-2 tactical system, were launched. Eyewitnesses in nearby towns described a flash bright enough to briefly turn night into day, followed by a chain of detonations that lasted for nearly 10 minutes. Initial reports from Russian emergency services confirmed widespread destruction. Several cargo wagons were reduced to wreckage, and at least 4 locomotives were destroyed. The primary damage, however, was the complete obliteration of the entire $2.8 billion shipment, which carried hundreds of tons of Chinese-manufactured war materials. Ukrainian defense officials later confirmed the strike had been planned for over a month, calling it one of the most economically significant hits against Russia's external supply networks to date. For Ukraine, this was a strategic message. The attack demonstrated that Ukrainian forces possess the intelligence capability and operational reach to disrupt Russia's logistical web, regardless of its origin. The strike challenged Moscow's assumption of security far beyond the immediate front lines. In Beijing, news of the destruction was met with official silence. Chinese state media made no mention of the incident. Independent tracking data from shipping networks abruptly stopped updates for several known logistics routes between China and Russia. Analysts suggested this silence reflected the precarious balance China must maintain, publicly portraying neutrality while quietly supporting Russia's war economy. For Moscow, the implications were severe. The Russian state logistics agency Rosoboronzakaz had reportedly coordinated the transport, believing the route to be secure. Instead, they suffered a major loss that impacted Russia's defense infrastructure. The strike eliminated months of procurement efforts and damaged the perception that Russian supply lines from Asia were untouchable. International observers noted this strike was different from earlier interdictions of Iranian or North Korean supplies due to its sheer scale and financial magnitude. As smoke cleared, satellite images began circulating. They showed rows of blackened containers scattered across the railway yard. The force of the explosion caused secondary fires at nearby infrastructure, including a small refinery. Russian authorities attempted to control the narrative, claiming the blast was a fuel accident. The precision damage pattern, however, suggested a targeted military strike. In Kyiv, officials were measured. A defense ministry spokesperson stated, "Ukraine will continue to defend itself against all sources of aggression. Wherever weapons are assembled to kill our citizens, we will find and destroy them." The statement affirmed Ukraine's capacity for intelligence-driven precision. Western analysts, including those at NATO, described the operation as a turning point in hybrid warfare strategy. They noted it combined surveillance, cyber intelligence, and long-range kinetics in one synchronized strike, demonstrating Ukraine's rapid evolution into a technologically integrated force capable of economic attrition. The Kremlin scrambled to contain the fallout. Reports surfaced of an emergency session within Russia's Ministry of Defense just hours after the blast. Internal communications reportedly revealed concern over how Ukraine obtained the intelligence, suggesting a possible data breach within Russian or even allied Chinese systems. The loss also threatened ongoing negotiations with Beijing for future shipments. By midday, the incident sparked renewed debate in Europe over sanctions enforcement and China's role. In Washington, defense briefings highlighted the strike as evidence of Ukraine's growing intelligence capabilities. The event underscored the evolving nature of modern warfare, where conflicts are fought not only on battlefields, but also across networks of logistics, data, and global trade. The destruction of the $2.8 billion shipment became a geopolitical event. China, as the supplier, found itself at the center of a diplomatic situation. What had been a covert operation was now exposed. China's foreign ministry offered a brief statement, noting that China opposes any attacks on civilian infrastructure and supports dialogue for peace. Internal trade departments and the Central Military Commission held meetings to determine how the convoy was traced and its exact location and contents identified. The conclusion, according to some Western analysts, was that Ukraine's intelligence network had penetrated parts of the Sino-Russian logistics corridor. If true, this meant Ukraine might have insight not only into Russian supply chains, but also into China's shadow logistics system. In Moscow, the atmosphere was one of frustration. The Russian Ministry of Defense faced internal pressure. State media initially ignored the story, then tried to reframe it as an attack on an industrial supply train. The loss carried implications beyond the financial. The cargo included advanced thermal imaging modules, radar calibration systems, and rare composite materials sourced from Chinese state-linked manufacturers. These components were reportedly essential for Russia's next-generation drone and missile programs. Their destruction could delay several production cycles. Inside Russia's military-industrial sector, executives from major defense contractors reportedly convened to assess the shortages. A US State Department spokesperson described the strike as proof that China's material support for Russia is neither invisible nor invulnerable. This public exposure undermined Beijing's diplomatic assurances of neutrality. Ukrainian officials continued to frame the incident as a defensive necessity. Mikhailo Podolyak, a senior presidential advisor, stated, "Every shipment that contributes to aggression against Ukraine is a legitimate target. The path to peace is not built through secret convoys of war materials." Inside Russia, the incident was described by some observers as a loss of confidence event, leading decision-makers to question the sustainability of their dependence on foreign partners. Early indicators, such as satellite imagery showing reduced heavy cargo movement on border rail crossings, suggested Beijing was temporarily re-evaluating the risks. At the same time, Moscow explored alternative supply routes, such as Iran's Caspian corridor, but these adjustments would come at a high financial and logistical cost. Global markets reacted nervously. Defense stocks in Europe and the US rose, while shares in several Chinese industrial conglomerates linked to electronics and aerospace manufacturing dipped. In Beijing's policy circles, debates reportedly intensified. Some argued for strategic caution to avoid confrontation with the West. Others viewed the strike as a challenge that demanded a calibrated response. For Russia, the sense of isolation grew, exposing the war machine's reliance on fragile external lifelines. Internationally, the operation reignited debates over strategic interdiction. While some questioned the risks of striking foreign origin cargo within Russia, most Western leaders quietly acknowledged Ukraine's right to defend itself against external enablers. The information war intensified as Russian state channels struggled to maintain their narrative. Local witnesses had already uploaded footage of the debris before security forces could impose restrictions. The imagery spread across encrypted networks, showing twisted rail lines and Chinese-manufactured components scattered in the wreckage. The strike represented a strategic inflection point, exposing the vulnerabilities of a clandestine alliance and revealing the extent of Ukraine's intelligence penetration. It sent a clear message to both Moscow and Beijing that their cooperation was no longer invisible or invulnerable. As the dust settled, the world was left to assess a transformation in the war's structure. The event exposed fractures within Russia's alliance system and accelerated a new phase of strategic isolation for the Kremlin. In Kyiv, there was a sense that Ukraine had reached a new level of strategic deterrence, proving it could strike the hidden arteries sustaining the war. The immediate impact was seen in Moscow's logistical paralysis. The Russian military, already facing replenishment challenges, now faced new delays. Key factories responsible for guided munitions and drone systems were forced to assess component shortages. For President Vladimir Putin, the loss was both strategic and symbolic, shattering the illusion that the partnership with China was untouchable. Across the world, reactions mirrored this sense of realignment. In Brussels and Washington, leaders praised the strike's effectiveness. Even Tokyo and Seoul issued renewed calls for coordination against emerging military supply chains. The long-term military ramifications were profound. With one strike, Ukraine had demonstrated that logistical warfare, targeting the economic and technological veins of an adversary, could be devastating. NATO strategists concluded that the conflict had entered a new era, where intelligence coordination and precision define outcomes. For Russia, this realization forced a difficult turn. As China hesitated to resume large-scale support, Moscow turned again to North Korea and Iran for armaments. But both regimes, wary of recent interdictions, demanded higher prices and greater secrecy. In contrast, Ukraine's diplomatic momentum grew. Countries previously hesitant to supply advanced weaponry began to reassess, seeing that Ukraine could wield high-tech systems responsibly. The strike redefined the boundaries of the conflict and sent a message that echoed far beyond the battlefield. In this new era, information travels quickly, and the networks supporting a war are now part of the battlefield itself.